All right. I'm so happy to welcome a whole panel to the podcast this morning, afternoon, evening. We are doing the seemingly impossible here today by joining the West Coast with the East Coast in North America with United Kingdom and India. I have quite the panel with me, and you know, we are just defying time and time zones today. So I want to welcome Christina Caudill, Sherene Vismaya, and Georgia Takacs to the program today in a nodes panel. We're going to talk all about Taurus and Scorpio, the nodal axis that is upon us, and we're already feeling it. And it's going to be a lot to talk about. So we are little under a time crunch here today just because of time zone considerations. So I'm going to lead in with a straight to the point. Let's hear from these ladies first, who they are, what they do, and then we're going to get into the conversation. So Sherene, will you start us off telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Just like the nodes, I'm in a transitional phase. So that's always an interesting question. But I'll tell you who I was. I don't know how I'm going to be, but I'll tell you where I'm coming from. Pre-nodal shift over all my planets. In my ascendant, I'm just coming off the south node going over my ascendant. So yeah, I spent the last 20 plus years of my life as an astrologer, a Jungian analyst, living between New York City and San Francisco and making yearly pilgrimages to India, teaching retreats all over the world, all kinds of fun stuff. And then, basically the pandemic hit, and then I just stayed in India. My yearly pilgrimage turned into my home, which was kind of my dream anyway. So it's become more my home base now, which is wonderful. Actually, it's kind of a funny super Vedic astrology superstition I was told by my Vedic astrology mentor. He said, don't call India your home because I have Rahu, or the North Node, in my fourth house, and it loves foreign places. So if I say this is my home, it'll be taken away from me. So I have to say it's my home away from home.
Interesting. That's
home away from home. My ideal home away from home in transition. And so, yeah, and I'm moving, which actually this is a great lead into the discussion about the nodes. I feel like this transition I'm making is more into Taurian kinds of pursuits. Like I've always had this passion for authentic movement and embodiment and somatic work. And I feel I'm shifting my focus and my priorities to make that where I put more of my time and energy going forward, that I actually have the time to work on that, and with Gemini and Sag, I think we were still under that illusion that we could do everything. We could do all the things. And now I'm realizing with Taurus and Scorpio, like I want to go deep and I want to focus on the things that I really want to focus on right now, which means sacrificing some things. So anyway, that's my transitional.
Oh man, I feel that. I feel everything you just said, and I'm looking forward to that aspect of Taurus and Scorpio, because you think about it as rooting down, going deep. It's not the surface level so much of mercurial and Jupiterian worlds of Gemini and Sagittarius. So I like that you bring that up, and especially embodying it, because embodying things in life takes time, right? You just don't become it. You have to practice it. So I love that. Well, welcome to the program from India there. Now, how about you, Georgia, over there in London area, right?
Yes, nearish London. For those that aren't in England, I'm in Essex, for those that do know England, but yes, just sort of a stone's throw from London relatively. But I'm here in England, which is where I'm from, as you can hear by my accent. I often stick out in these spaces, especially because most of my friends in the astrology community are US side actually. So, but yeah, I'm Georgia Takacs. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, currently based in England. And with my practice, Sacred Astrology, I offer one-to-one astrology consultations, and I offer them and everything that I do actually in The Gift, which is a new and ancient economic model for which I'm a passionate advocate. You cannot shut me up about it, as I know Christina, my dear friend, and Melissa, I've worked with you both before, and Sherene as well, actually. So it's wonderful to be in familiar space with you all today. And yeah, I'm also an ever-growing sacred activist. And my work is primarily influenced by the indigenous peoples that I have traveled to, lived with, worked with, and learned from, including my own indigenous relatives of the Shklatliam Nation in Canada. I'm also massively influenced by the work of Charles Eisenstein and the emerging deep adaptation conversation and community. I'm really, really passionate, and this is why I'm so extra, excited about, intrigued by, and really can't wait for what's going to unfold in the next year and a half with this Taurus Scorpio transit of the nodes. That we are absolutely in the midst of a huge evolutionary leap of humanity, and how we are really shifting from an old story into a new story, to use the language of Charles Eisenstein, and that we are in this space between stories. And it's really fascinating me what that deepening and that integration and that actual practicing, living and breathing our values and our practices is going to look like in the next year and a half. I think things are about to get real. And that's, yeah. So I'm very excited to talk about this with you guys today. Yeah, that's me. A little bit of me.
We're excited to have you, Georgia, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say and share more of the gift with us too, because I know you're all about the gift economy, which is seemingly it feels very Taurian to me as well. So and last but certainly not least, one of my dear friends, Christina Caudill, who just happens to have a Scorpio Taurus nodal access. So you're perfect to join us here today. So Christina, take the floor.
Thank you. I'm Christina Caudill, a regular guest on the Energetic Principles podcast. I think that's my second job. And I'm with Radiant Astrology. I have my own podcast, but it's been kind of on a hiatus, not really intentionally, but it just kind of worked out that way. And thank you, Sherene, for pointing out that the recent nodes, because I have Mars in Gemini in the 6th, I was also scrambling, trying to do all the things, and some things fell through the cracks. And one of them was my own podcast, which I'm kind of also in a transition. And as you said, my natal nodes, I have South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus. But the last time that I had this inverse nodal return, like 19 years ago, when the North Node moved into Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio, that was a major life-changing shift for me, and mostly in good ways that I can remember, that I can recall. But I'm kind of open to the possibility of realignment, because to me the nodes are really about realigning, because as we know, the nodes are not actually bodies, they're points in space, right, that really help us to see how the path of the moon intersects with the apparent path of the sun, the ecliptic around the earth. And so something about these points just create some major shifts that we may call fate or destiny, or just some kind of irreversible unfolding of whether it's past karma, future evolution. But the reality is, even when we step back from all of these keywords that we love to use to understand it, we know that something is coming, especially those of us with fixed signs, which all of us, I think, have plenty of Scorpio and Taurus, and I think there's some Leos in here, and Aquarius. So it feels like this is our time to step up, right? I mean, those with that were really affected by the nodes and the eclipses and the mutable signs, it's almost like, okay, you guys, you had your chance, now we're up. And I'm actually
they'll gladly give the floor, I'm sure,
right? Whereas we may be tentatively stepping into it, but as we've said, I love, Melissa, that we decided to do this talk just after, or give us a little time after the nodal shift actually happened, so that rather than just guessing what's going to happen, I mean, of course there's some of that future projecting, but we've had a chance to see. I always feel like when the nodes first shift, and I tend to use the true nodes, that, within that first, week or two, pay attention to what are these archetypal symbols that are showing us in the collective. And that, for me, sort of points to opportunities for collective evolution, for our personal transformational growth, especially with, Taurus and Scorpio. These are some of the things that I'm kind of really looking forward to observing.
Yeah. Yeah. And and it's interesting because I follow the true nodes. I don't know about the rest of you ladies. But some people follow the mean nodes, and really the mean node had done the shift around December 22nd, and then the true node calculations around January 18th. So we've been sitting in this space of, it's a liminal space, which speaks to the Scorpio energy, I'm sure here, but, I already feel it. I feel it, definitely feel it. And I'm excited for it. And I think that seems to be the thread through each one of our conversations so far, is that we're looking forward to the transition, and the fixed element of it, too, after all this time of movement and uncertainty. And it doesn't mean life's going to get that much more certain. I mean, there are some elements about the nodal shift and definitely the Uranian involvement that is going to be there. But I think that there definitely is a settling down that we can lean into here. So Christina had given a few words of the nodes, which we hear things like fate, destiny, which are loaded words. It exists. I mean, we've all been in fateful situations or destined situations where we feel like serendipity is at play, or depending on the situation, of course. But Sherene, do you have any other, I know keywords really finite something, but any other thoughts of the purpose of the nodes or things we can lean into there?
Sure. I mean, I was just, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about how, one of the ways that I do readings is I like to look at what's happening at the time that you're doing the reading itself. I'm so fascinated with the background and the fact that we're doing this we're having this conversation on Mars Day, the day of Mars, which is the South Node, of course, in Scorpio, on the last quarter moon in Scorpio. Mars is changing signs today in Capricorn, going into exaltation. So if we look at it's kind of, it's not exactly the ingress right now, but just the idea of the opening. I always like to look at the opening energy of anything. So it's kind of this is interesting. Of course, maybe it's my bias of having a lot of planets in Scorpio that I'm focusing right now more on Scorpio. But I think since we're having the conversation under all this very strong Mars-y Scorpio energy, also let's not forget Mars and Venus are going into their dance all of February. We're in that, we're already in Vedic astrology, they call it the planetary war, the Graha Yuddha between Mars and Venus, the tangoing. So, if we think about I think that's very interesting because, of course, the nodes are also reflecting Mars-Venus conversation, right? Because Taurus being ruled by Venus, Scorpio being ruled by Mars. So there's definitely a strong inner dialogue. Maybe this is the Jungian in me too speaking, but what's come up since this nodal shift for me has been revisiting Carl Jung's, read by Alan Watts. I just posted this in one of the groups I'm doing recently, this amazing conversation he has. Carl Jung is speaking about the inner civil war. And to me, that feels like the Mars and Venus dance and the nodal dance. The thing that I think gets overlooked a lot in discussions about the nodes is that they are polarized. It's a polarity that we have to integrate, and it is showing this very intense, it's an inner split, an inner dialogue going on a collective level that we have to find some kind of, Jung would say, what's the middle ground, or what is the transcendent function that's going to evolve, kind of the magical third thing that could evolve from this polarizing, right? So if we think about that dance, that Mars-Venus dance, I'm thinking of that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. That's been coming up in people's recently. Speaking of Mercury, Venus retrograde, it's interesting that people have been referencing that book lately in my sessions, and I'm like, that's interesting because that is definitely a Mars-Venus theme, right? It's old school, but whatever the new version of that is, we should look actually when that book came out if there was some kind of similar nodal Mars-Venus thing. It could have been Aries Libra even, because that's the other version of Mars Libra nodes, right? But or a Mars-Venus planetary war. This is an unusual Mars-Venus planetary war because of the Venus retrograde. And, you know, they're not usually so close together for so long. It's very unusual. So the fact that that's happening while we're in this change of nodes is very, very interesting to me, that we are looking at how we do our Mars and Venus energies and how we're doing our relationships, and what we feel about relationships and what we feel about that dance, that inner dance of Mars and Venus. Yeah, and ultimately our inner civil war between Anima and Animus that we're all always dealing with. I could have a whole podcast on that. But.
Yeah, that's it's big stuff. You know, we think about Mars and Venus. I was just talking about this on the podcast last episode, thinking about the idea of connection and unity and wholeness and the separative quality, and how in relationship we need both connection and to be our own entity, because that's the only way that the two kind of come together. And so it feels like there's a lot of lessons that are going to be imparted within this nodal shift around that, because we absolutely need both. But as you were just displaying with the dance, it has to be a balance with it, which is a very Venusian thing, but it's always the polarity and the opposition. And with oppositions and that kind of Saturnian aspect of it, right? It's the most distance you can possibly get. Well, how do we meet in the middle with that? And it's a constant battle. Maybe that's where the battle part comes in, of how to balance those areas out. And for, just so everyone knows, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Well, I mean, that's subjective, but that was written in 1992, which was an interesting time, just thinking about culture and, you know, like the, I don't know, there's the time period of where women were at, where men were at. Women were making their most strides at that time, because the 80s were still pretty almost restrictive. We didn't realize it. It seems like women were coming out in the 80s, but there were still like things, especially financially, that you know, women were getting through to gain that more interdependence. So it's an interesting time point. The nodes were in actually a Capricorn and Cancer at that time. Which kind of is, I could see how that would speak a little bit too when we think about that mother and father type of archetype. But
and Pluto and Scorpio at the time too, which is interesting, because hopefully I would like to at some point circle around to the Pluto and Scorpio generation, if that's interesting, because I know you've got some charts we're going to look at, but it'd be interesting to see that generation has already made, you know, big strides in the world in various ways. And so they'll be having that, you know, collective sort of nodal, you know, impetus, urge for being the transformers potentially in the world in one way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to think about and to play off that, and also what Sherene was talking about the back-to-back Mars Venus kind of opposition dance that happens with Scorpio Taurus and Aries and Libra. It's interesting to think about how the nodes moving backwards in the zodiac stimulate those two axes back to back. So we go from, you know, we grow in the Venusian way, we release from the Mars, and then that switches. So we're kind of in this, you know, 3.5 year period where it is a lot of Venus and Mars, and how we interact with that and all the eclipses that go there. But Georgia, what do you think about the any, you know, nodal observations for yourself, or what you can add to the conversation around just, you know, being an evolutionary astrologer? Nodes are so important, right?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to start with that, because absolutely. And when we look at with evolutionary astrology, really the first and the meatiest and the deepest place that we look at in the chart, that is really transformative actually for someone who's never had an evolutionary astrology reading. Maybe they've had many other different types of readings, but we look at Pluto and the nodes of the moon, and also the moon itself is very informative too. But Pluto and the nodes really, I mean, often, you know, we give it that name of the soul's path, and yes, you know, the path of destiny to some degree, and there's a lot of karmic dynamics involved with the nodes. But it, you know, that when we're looking at it on that collective level, when there's that, you know, the transits that are affecting all of us collectively, as to where those nodes are in it, you know, 1.6 years roughly, they change signs. I think about the fact that, for example, when for example, I have the nodes. It's interesting you were talking about the polarity, right? We're literally dancing with that polarity, that axis, for 1.6 years. And it is a sort of a deep dive into those mystery schools, and we're truly schooled in it. And it actually as well, it really is where it's that domain of that terrain of learning, which becomes very personal and very real, because it is about integration. It's about really integrating, into what actually informs our sense of self and is very real in our lives in this here and now. And I think about how, you make wherever your personal nodes are, and then it's very different when we actually have the collective transit, because, for example, for me, Gemini Sagittarius, I actually have very little Gemini and Sagittarius in my own chart relative to other energies. And yet, regardless, I was initiated into a deep schooling in that realm, I mean, it doesn't just affect those that have heavy Gemini Sagittarius, that affects us all. And yet that's a wonderful invitation. That's a wonderful opportunity. The nodal transits really present us with opportunities to really dive deep into those areas and to wrestle with and negotiate these two extremes. And I have walked away from that transit with immense learnings. And now, of course, I'm now diving into more familiar terrain, which is the Taurus Scorpio axis. I have tons of energy along that axis. So, a lot of people that don't have that energy, Taurus Scorpio, and as well, it's tough terrain, because Taurus Scorpio, we're going into realms that are really non-verbal in many ways. They're really like lower chakra, like deep. You kind of got to feel it and live it and breathe it to know it. And that's why there's almost this unspoken understanding between Scorpionic people and Taurian people too. There's just something we recognize and understand and feel with each other. And now we're all being initiated into that school of learning. But one thing I wanted to share too, just on that note of polarity that you guys were bringing up, was that, and of course we'll be looking at this more if we get to the, Saturn square the nodes, for example, is anyone who has any planets squaring the nodes. And this is such a huge focus in evolutionary astrology. I have Venus square the nodes, for example, is that it means that there is this, there's this dynamic where you are almost like, there's this, something's unresolved in the polarity. You're literally being sort of pushed or pulled, you flip-flop between the two extremes in a way that really invites you, initiates you to find that middle ground, to find that space of negotiation. And it is tough. And so I think, that Saturn square, the nodes, is really going to reveal that for all of us this year. But any nodal transit, any, the South Node and the North Node. And I just love that saying that says, it's not either or, it's both and more. Because that's one of the things that I love to think about when it comes to the nodal axis, is that there's a common misconception that it's about, when we talk about it as a pathway, we think about it as moving from the South Node into the North Node. And that's actually quite a common misconception, because in so many ways, we're not really leaving anything behind. We are releasing, there is a drainage there on the South Node, but in so many ways, we're also reclaiming, we're revisiting, like, I think of, the South Node and Pluto, we are in so many ways reclaiming our power, and power that has been lost, or, depth that has been lost, truth that has been lost or ignored, and we're integrating it and bringing it in. So there's, it's like, I think, there's, instead of that non-linear way of looking at the nodes, I just love to think of it as the two coming together and this true integration. And it really becomes very real and tangible for everyone. It's something we're really collectively going through, and sets a tone for this next year and a half. So those are my thoughts.
Those are wonderful thoughts. I love that you bring up the fact that, the South Node isn't all bad. Why it gets such a bad rap. Yeah, there are things that come from it. There are things that we have to move on from it, the traps of it. But I feel like there's so many gifts that come from it too. And even having it transiting in the sky, especially, the transit of the South Node over a natal planet. I feel like a lot of times we we maybe even remember gifts that we forgot that we had, or there's access to something that has been on ice for a while that hasn't got, its day, and it gets activated, and it's like, hey, you remember me? You're pretty efficient, or in this, bring it to the surface again, right? It's almost like bring it up from the bottom and rise it to the top. But unless we have kind of that stimulus to remind us, we kind of forget those gifts and qualities that are just innate within us. So I love that you bring that up. Yeah, we are Taurus Scorpio folks here. What does everybody have in Taurus and Scorpio? Sherene, what do you have there?
I have Saturn in Taurus, and then I have Sun, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, and Vesta in Scorpio.
Wow. So, well, that being said, what archetypes can you provide for us with the Taurus Scorpio? Like what, because we're all going to have our own takes on it, right? Because we all have heavy placements there, but I feel like you're a good place to start here.
Well, I always feel like it's like the creation destruction axis. For me, the more I've delved into it over the years, I really feel like there's something very, it's like the artist meets the esoteric or the psychological, the depth psychology. Like I think of things like, what's interesting is when I was born, the year I was born, when there was, like around the time I was born, actually, when there was that strong Scorpio Taurus polarity going on between Saturn and Taurus and the planets in Scorpio, and it's funny, one of my mentors, who is an art therapist, one of the first art therapists, kind of created art therapy in New York City, Art Robbins. It was founded in that time. That's when art therapy came to be. So I kind of think, art therapy, like Taurus, like the creativity, but then like going into the Scorpio depth, and I don't think people talk enough about how creative that is. I mean, even Picasso has a lot of Scorpio Taurus kind of polarity. Like it's very creative and very deep and very passionate, that combination. Archetypes, I mean, if we think tarot archetypes, we could think of it like the death card, Scorpio all about the death and the transformation and kind of the Kali energy. I have Kali behind me here. And Taurus being more of that earthy empress, garden, bull, I just think of like the earth, the giving birth to something new, and the Scorpio kind of destroying, like you have to create to destroy and destroy to create. So it's that whole cycle really. So maybe I imagine if we think of like the positive, as we were just speaking of, with K2 or the South Node being about forgotten gifts, or, what's interesting in Vedic astrology, K2 is considered in his own sign in Scorpio. Like he likes to be in Scorpio. And it's also got a kind of a Mars energy, K2 or South Node. So there's this like, I think there's going to be a very strong emphasis. There's this strong Mars energy going on right now. Like I said, the fact that we're having this conversation on Mars Day under Scorpio last quarter moon, and Mars going into his exaltation in Western astrology. So I feel like we're going to be reclaiming or going back into our own inner Mars warrior gifts. Like I think we're going to all have to kind of become warriors, especially when Jupiter goes into Aries this spring. That'll be an interesting kind of another Mars note going on where, we're kind of all on the battlefield in a way. I think this battlefield energy is going to be pretty strong in 2022. This part of I think we're going to have different versions, different chapters of the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, but it feels like the onset is kind of like getting ready for some kind of battle. That's the feeling I get. The Civil War energy keeps coming to me. I mean, I don't know. I want that. I'm saying that because I'm hoping people can deal with their own internal civil war to hopefully, in any way we can, like Thich Nhat Hanh style, right? Prevent having to live it out. Like Jung says, anything that's not conscious, we have to live it out as fate. So if we can do the inner work and wrestle with this destruction, creation energy, or this inner polarity. Maybe we won't have to fight it out on the battlefield when Jupiter goes into Aries, hopefully.
I know. I mean, I saw one of the first, it's a great point, because I saw recently on NPR, they had an article talking about like, at least here in America, you know, the chances of a civil war, but it won't be a civil war between the country. It'll be a civil war between each state. And like, and the talk's already coming up, and you're absolutely right. You know, we war with each other when we're at war with ourselves. And it's important to remember that, especially when we get into the projection and what we're talking about with oppositions and that polarity aspect, because there's always projection that comes with it. So I love all those points. Christina, tell us, what do you have in Taurus and Scorpio? I know you got a lot of Scorpio. And so what do you think about all that and the access there?
I don't necessarily like to reveal myself.
Oh, well,
but since I'm in
that's Scorpio.
We're in our little coven, our little Scorpio coven. Let's see. I've got Moon conjunct my part of fortune, and Uranus, and then the North Node conjunct Venus, all in Scorpio, and then South Node in Taurus. I think that's. Oh, I think. Wait, do I have like an asteroid there? I'm not really sure, but I think that's pretty much. It's very Scorpio heavy.
Yeah. I have a feeling, I think we're more Scorpio heavy in this room. Maybe not in Georgia. We'll get to Georgia, but a lot of Scorpio rolling around these parts.
And I wanted to just bring up a little bit about what we were talking about just before we press record, is that we were noting how when the nodes first shifted, I don't have the dates with me, but I think we all collectively were paying attention to this cluster of what appeared to be elders, not all elders, there's also some others here and there, but like just very sort of people who have been part of the zeitgeist, if you will, in their lives, who passed away, you know, within just seemed like one after the other within a short period of time. And yes, we're in a pandemic, but they didn't all pass from COVID or anything like that. You know, some did, but basically just people, I think you said mostly in their 90s. That's past like what the Uranus return or something like that, right? Yeah. So I mean, so it's kind of normal, but the fact that these were all people that actually in many ways really uplifted humanity, I believe inspired people on a real sort of humane level. Like first, let's see, Betty White and Desmond Tutu and Sidney Poitier, absolutely such an incredibly elegant man and an incredible actor and activist, and Thich Nhat Hanh recently, and in between, just it seemed like so many, to the point where it's kind of hard to really just mourn each one individually, unless sometimes I feel like, you know, when we're touched by somebody, even if it's a big celebrity who we've never met, then part of them, you know, lives on in us. And maybe that is part of this, you know, this message of the nodes making that transition is about these elders transitioning. And I remember in your talk with Gray Crawford, you'd said that this year, like so much happening in Scorpio, Taurus, and Aquarius, that Leo is kind of empty at least until Leo season. Then it gets a little bit of love right there with the sun and the Venus and Mercury. But you know, that to me says that I've also observed that when some big, you know, people who have taken the collective attention, when they pass on, then what they stood for, or what in the way that they have uplifted humanity, that's a reminder for us that lives within us too, and maybe we can carry on that legacy in our own way. So to me, that's very Aquarian. It's sort of the spreading of the light rather than it just being focused on one person, because I think even the point of even you know, a celebrity or a guru, if you will, is that they're just a focal point for what lives on and what's possible in us. You know, we think that there's certain special people that are just born special or have a special destiny, but maybe in some ways they are an awareness for us that there is a potential within us to live a certain way, to bring some sort of light into the world, or to activate something within us that maybe we don't always recognize in ourselves. And so, these things happen all the time, but with the nodes in Taurus Scorpio, I loved what Sherene said about, we may feel stretched and polarized by these, differing drives and urges, but then, what is that transcendent function that is, within us to integrate, to balance, and to find sort of a third way of being that is like a really creative way of being within this polarity of these nodes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense.
What would you guys think about, it just came to me, I don't know, because of what Christina was saying, that was such an astute observation about like that missing Leo area. And I was just thinking, like, I was trying to think, what would be the transcendent function of a Taurus Scorpio inner civil war? Would it be Aquarius? Like, could we think of it like they meet in Aquarius, or they ground in Leo somehow? Or it's interesting to think about, I guess, depending on
there was an EA, I think it was a Jeffrey Wolf Green sort of insight where you stand on, tell me if I'm getting this right, Georgia, you stand on the south node and then you look to the left, and that's where the integration is, I believe. I mean, I think we like to do these formulaic things, but and then other people say, well, there's more ways of looking at it, but there may be some real, wisdom to that. So that would be, south node in Taurus. I'm sorry, we're south node in Scorpio. So to the left would be Leo. So
Aquarius. Yeah, Leo is the north bending and Aquarius is the south bending. So what you're saying, that's interesting. And once again, we're back to a polarity, right? Like, where do we have to ground in ourselves and realize that we're always a part of a community in the wide world, like it's once again, it's not one or the other. It's, but remembering who we are within all that, and remembering where our heart is at, right? I mean, it's not, well, some people not, I have some Leo, but it's like, I don't know, if we are going into this prominent point of creation in time, right? Sherene was just talking about the death card versus the birth card. Christina's bringing up, all these deaths that are potent. It makes me wonder what's to be born and who's to be born during this time, right? When you have these like very impactful souls leave the planet, the universe abhors a vacuum. So of course, some entities are going to come into place that replace that, or not replace it, but add to it. And so it just makes me think more about that, and just how we can connect with our heart.
Before about like we'll eventually have this Saturn squaring the node, Saturn in Aquarius. So that, and Saturn has these tough lessons. So that might be, it can be tough. It depends on how integrated. I actually have Saturn square my nodes natally, but so yeah, it can be tough. But isn't that interesting in Aquarius? And like, say Hollywood and all that, LA, that's very Leo, right? Isn't that that's the Leo archetype? And in America, we've been seen as that has been for a long time, kind of like where we get our sort of source from, our energy source and our attention. And now it almost seems like that's also shifting, it's like, it's not as big a deal of red carpet, something for a movie coming out, because anyway, people are watching stuff on Netflix at home, they're not as drawn to that. And it seems like more of if there are stars, actors or whatever, they can't be all about themselves. They almost they seem to be elevated more when they have something more to say that tends to be, whether it's activism or something beyond just their own specialness. So that's just something that I'm just kind of been observing, and maybe we might see more of that as that square comes into, the T square with Saturn comes into.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, where are we getting a lot of our entertainment now? The community with like TikTok, everybody's watching everybody else. They're not watching a centralized focus. And you brought up a great point of like stars taking to activism. I mean, there's been a lot of talk around a Scorpio, Leo DiCaprio's new movie, Don't Look Up. Is that what it's called? Talking about I have not seen it yet, so I can't speak to it, but I know a lot of people are like, Georgia's like, yes. Have you seen it, Georgia?
Oh, yes, I have. I actually had a lot of thoughts on that film edging up to today, but absolutely, that's interesting. I'm assuming you're thinking of Leonardo DiCaprio and how he's, of course, such a huge central poster figure in Hollywood, and yet he's devoted much of his like mature years to climate activism, and that film was absolutely spoke to the climate crisis and the collective attitudes to it. And really how they essentially have to change. That film was fascinating. I implore anyone to watch it. There have been so many. Do you know what's just as interesting as the film itself is the reaction to the film. I think it says a lot about where we're at. It's such a litmus test. It's fascinating. There's so much to say on that. But yes, is that what you were getting at, Melissa?
That's actually exactly a great example.
Yeah.
For what, I was kind of sensing, and then
I immediately thought of course,
because and Leo, his name Leo, and it's not all just about him and his great performance. It's the message of that. And again, yes, some people are extreme because we were used to looking at Hollywood films as making us feel good, aspirational, and this is like, we're all gonna die.
Wake up!
Burn up.
Humor.
Spoiler alert. We're all gonna.
Yeah. Which is fast. I mean, for us Scorpios, we're like, it's almost like we can breathe easy now. We're like, finally, you're actually like grounded in reality and not just, as in we need to talk about these things. And yeah, that is a service to humanity right now. I mean, we're going to be increasingly made aware of just how important it is that we do talk about the things that the most uncomfortable things, which is our own mortality and is the fragility of life itself. And so absolutely, it's amazing that people like Leonardo DiCaprio and all those actors actually that were a part of that film, it is a great service to humanity to use their platforms to centralize these conversations and get more people engaged with them, people that usually are up until this point, and they're not going to have the choice to do this for much longer, I don't think, because of how much we are facing already with the climate crisis, but ever more so. It's meaning that people can't hide from those conversations anymore. We have to address these things. We have to talk about them.
Yeah, it seems rather timely. It seems rather timely with the North Node moving into Taurus, right? I mean, I think we could probably all agree here that climate and land and how we interact with it and the Uranian component there is going to be very strong going forward. So the message coming out with this movie and the message that's going to continue seems pretty on.
And these food shortages that we're having already. I heard it. I mean, in the US, like I hear like these, my friend couldn't even get her cat food the other day.
Oh my gosh.
Not the cats. Well, and that speaks to sustainability. I think about like, I have a cat and I feed her something and I'm like always wondering like, where's this meat come from? This wet food, these like, just thinking about, big buzzword these days is supply chain, supply chain shortages. But I think it's going to make us think a lot about supply chain, where things come from, when things dry up, how did we get them in the first place? Is this sustainable? How does it affect the environment? I mean, these have been questions we've been asking for a long time, some more so than others. A lot of people are like, I don't care to know. I'm fine and comfortable just the way I am. And I think we're reaching a point where it's just something's got to give. And so I guess I'm kind of excited for that. I mean, it's terrifying in its same right, but I mean, we got to change sometime, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, like you said, it's a mix of anticipation and excitement because we know that something needs to change. I wrote this piece recently, and one of the first line in it, and so many people resonated with it, is simply, how do you feel about that phrase, everything is changing, right? Is it everything is changing? Oh, fuck, you know, bleep, 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 oh my God? Or is it everything is changing? Oh my goodness, thank goddess, I can't wait, you know? And of course, it's usually massive fluctuations between the two, but it does make me think of this Taurus Scorpio axis. I think as well about how, you know, on that note of the fact that, you know, that Uranus on the North Node is something that I am looking forward to ever since, you know, Uranus went into Taurus. It was like, okay, yes, because I have, speaking of which, I do have a lot on the Taurus Scorpio axis. And I have Moon in Taurus, and it's on my IC, and it opposes my Pluto on my MC with Pallas Athena, and then I also have that conjunct my Mars and my Sun in the 10th house. So that's my very intense.
Oh yeah.
Scorpio.
You got angles, you got luminaries, you got
moon.
Yeah, it's really, really intense. And it's like an everyday thing that I live and breathe because of that moon, you know, my moon in Taurus. Thank goddess for my moon in Taurus, though. I mean, I just have such a love for Taurus energy because of that. I mean, but then I love Scorpio too. I'm so passionate about that energy. But yeah, just thinking about on that note of the climate crisis and the every level ecological environmental crisis that we're in, and how back in beginning of 2019, I read Deep Adaptation, which is an academic journal paper that was written by Professor Jem Bendel, and has now become, I mean, it was a phenomenon. It was incredible. There's now this huge global community and conversation around that paper. And essentially the premise of the paper, the underlying statement really before it says anything else is that near-term societal collapse is inevitable due to climate change. That is a huge thing to say. It's a huge thing to contemplate and to stomach. But to be honest, you know, that paper was like deeply rooted in climate science and just practical observance of the world and, you know, observing the world and how things are mammothly changing. And you know, that paper was an academic journal paper, was read by so many people all over the world. And a lot of people, you know, woke up because of that paper and joined Extinction Rebellion because of that paper and came together in community around that paper. And they, but also got immense eco-anxiety. I absolutely did. I really went into Scorpio territory of facing some of the deepest fears on a personal, collective level I've ever faced in my life. But there was another side. And for me, the other side was actually a few months later. One of the other sides was that I actually traveled finally to the St'át'imc territory in Canada I connected with Indigenous wisdom before, and I spent some time in New Zealand connecting with and learning from the Maori people. But when I went to St'át'imc territory in Canada, that was my own Indigenous ancestors and relatives. I descend from the last hereditary chief of the Hatlip tribe. And I met my second day there, I met a chief who became a great friend and mentor, who absolutely agrees that he believes wholeheartedly that we are entering into a wholly new beautiful world. Right now, that's one of the premises of deep adaptation in the community. Many people believe that. You'll find, if you believe in the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, in that Taurian Garden of Eden, right, that Taurus North Node, if you have that vision, if you feel and you can feel it coming, it's like that beautiful quote that says, on a quiet day I can hear her breathing, right? You will find friends in the deep adaptation community. Absolutely. But like this chief said, and like this deep adaptation community acknowledges, it is likely going to get a lot worse before it gets better, because we're gonna go through Scorpio to get to that Garden of Eden. We're already in Scorpio anyway. I mean, we can be very acutely, like, it's very true that our world is not working. Our world and our system causes absolute daily hell for most people, and actually causes us immense amounts of suffering on an inward level, even if we feel that Taurianly we are actually very comfortable. On a deep Scorpionic soul level, all of us are suffering, you know, on some level. It's this world is we're in crisis on every level. So, but what I love is that, you know, yes, there is this Uranus and Taurus, I think, it's going to take us into and require us to have those conversations, to have that vision for a new and more beautiful world, whilst acknowledging that this old one has to die and is dying, and that we are going to be going through the Scorpio unraveling and what that will mean. I think that this is why, I do love the deep adaptation community for this reason. I do implore everyone to explore that paper or like that community. It's helped me so much. But one of the things for me that really like comes through, there's this gem. I'm just going to share my little Taurus moon gem that always helps me every day as I'm, constantly contemplating this existential like crisis that we're in. This cliff edge that we of course are kind of collectively hanging on in many ways, is that with my Taurus moon has the reason it has, I'm so grateful for it. And when Pluto went over my North Node in May 2012, and I was plummeted into my Scorpionic depths. I lost everything overnight. And I had all the existential crises and who am I? Why am I here? And the way that Taurus grounded me and has grounded me again and again is understanding, connecting with, clarifying my core values. And that's why I'm so excited about Uranus and Taurus, because I feel like Uranus and Taurus is awakening us, not to like the surface, very distorted version of Taurus that we have, which is often around like money and valuables and possessions, which yes, that's a part of Taurus, but the deepest, most essential gem and beauty of Taurus for me is our core values. That is something that, talk about Taurus, the long-term and the sustainable, what can we hold on to through the crisis, no matter what, through the inevitable uncertainties of Scorpio, is our core values. And once I clarified those 3 core values, I was like, okay, this is my life raft. This is what I have, what I can align my life with, can connect with no matter what, come back to again and again. And I think that's what I think Uranus and Taurus is going to be about, is really like awakening us to what are our values? What do we actually value before and beyond or else? There's books now coming out that I'm super excited about. People are having conversations about, I think we need to get really clear on like what we actually value as a society and as a humanity, and then start freaking aligning with it, because we're just kind of like, we're just bulldozing through on the earth with this vague notion of values, which are actually incredibly destructive. We don't even have clarity on them most of the time. So yeah, personally and collectively, I think the clarity around values is going to be so revolutionary. Talk about Uranus for this transit.
Yeah, I preach it every podcast. I'm talking about values. And I think the pandemic is going to get you, pandemic has got us closer to that. That's for sure. But lovely points, Georgia. You speak to the access well, as you should with all those planets there. But I know, Sherene, did you have any, it's lights out almost where you are, right? Is that what's going on? It's nighttime.
Like, it feels, it's like 2 a.m. for us here. I mean, because we get up at 4 a.m. here. So,
oh, geez. Oh my goodness. Do you have any last thoughts to share, or important things that you're like, I need to get this out there before I lay my, speak of pressure. You want some pressure before I lay my head on my pillow?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, there's so much to say. I really love this conversation. We could continue this ongoing, really. I think just a few other thoughts I had. One, I mean, I think it will be useful and important to track the movement of Mars and Venus throughout this nodal. I mean, as we said, it's going to continue. Mars and Venus are going to be tracking for many, many years where they are, which signs they're in, to kind of see how we're learning the lessons of the North and South node. And I think the return of the value, like the valuing the tangible, like with Taurus, like, we've all been in our heads for the last year and a half with all this Gemini energy. So the return to the body, the return to the earth, the return to simple things, simple pleasures. And I think there'll be a big focus on finding our voice. There'll probably be you'll probably notice people getting really into working on their voice like understanding how much you can learn about a person through their voice, and ourselves through our voice. I think that's going to be probably a big theme. And again, I love that we're looking at the backdrop with Uranus being in Taurus as well, which we've been in that lesson for a few years now. But that liberating kind of influence on top of all the other lessons going on. And then of course, we didn't get into that, but I think I'm really curious to see how this crypto thing plays out, with Rahu, North Node in Taurus. I've been on the fence about whether to get in it or not. I'm very Saturn in Taurus that way, where I'm like, I like to be able to touch my money. I want to feel it. I want it in my house. Like I like to actually have it in front of me. Like I have it like here. Like, there's my money. On the shelf, I can like reach up and get it. Under the mattress kind of thing. No, I never had it under the mattress, but just like the tangible. Like I like the tangible. So I've been reluctant. Also, when you have Saturn and Taurus, you're very slow to change. Even though I have all that Scorpio, I'm very slow to make changes and I'm very slow to embrace new things. So maybe, there's the idea more, maybe this is more of a Vedic astrology kind of understanding of the North Node or Rahu, that it becomes what you're obsessed with, the movement of, like, it amplifies. It's an amplifier. Rahu is an amplifier. The North Node's an amplifier. It becomes what we're obsessed with. So we may all become more obsessed with Taurian kinds of things going into this. Our bodies, our security, our grounding. I think people are I've already noticed the shift that people are obsessed with land. Like people want to buy land.
Yes.
They want to grow their food. They want property. They want security. They want animals. They want a farm. They want their own farm.
And then we're experiencing the craziest inflation ever here over in the U.S. for land, and so that is and that is a theme throughout the last passages of this transit. Really is. In the 80s, it was talking about another housing and loan crisis. It was like the concentration of a small banking loan crisis happened basically in the 80s during this time. And you bring up a great point of just value in general and wanting to touch your money, because I think a lot of things with watching crypto is going to be very interesting. But one of the things I struggle with most for cryptocurrency is actually assessing the value of it and what makes it valuable, and the toll that it takes on the environment in order to mine this thing that I don't really fully understand at the same time. And so there's going to be a lot of conversations around that. And I feel you. I want that money in my mattress too. I'm like, I want it at my, there's a lot of energy of, not distrust. Trust is a very big thing that comes up with this axis too. Trust. And it historically has shown that there is instability in things like the banking system and the stock markets at this time. So that's a reality. And do we take that risk? Do we join the rest of the herd to put our money into crypto, or do we hold back knowing that, or do you buy that house right now that is literally $75,000 more than it was a few months ago because you feel the urge to get in? Is that bubble going to crash? These are like all big questions that come up. And Uranus is going to keep us guessing as we go through this, I have a feeling. But I'm glad you bring this up.
I agree. There's an unstable feeling. That's kind of the irony. There's an unstable feeling. I guess that's that polarity. Like we can't get too comfortable, because in a way you could say if K2 or the South Node is in Scorpio in its own sign, it probably has a little more power in this situation, especially right now with Mars being exalted. I think we're under that influence right now. We're on the Mars side right now, more than Venus right now. Mars is winning. Mars is in his exaltation. I think Mars is winning right now at the moment. It'll change again, but especially when Venus gets exalted in Pisces with Jupiter and Neptune.
I know.
That'll be nice.
Those will be some North Node moments right there. And it just happens to coincide with the eclipses, especially April 30th, that solar eclipse.
Yes, and the last, yes, oh my God, yeah, we didn't even talk about the eclipses. Oh my God. Well, maybe you guys will talk about that when I go to sleep. But I just want to say one other kind of just a random fun thought, just to make it more Venus, poor Venus. It'll be interesting to see if like I kind of have this intuition that perfume will take off, you know, like it'll have like a resurgence with the Taurus. 'Cause I always think of Taurus so much about like the scent and the smell and food, of course. I think the food industry will be interesting. I mean, maybe because we'll be able to eat at restaurants again. I mean, I don't even know what's happening with all that restaurant business, but yeah, perfume. I don't know. I sort of feel like there'll be this kind of revival of the perfume industry.
Well, I feel like I love that because I'm someone who's really into the purity of scent. And I don't know, I'm so sensitive to it. And having someone walk by that has perfume, that it has like all these like artificial chemicals and things along those lines. I'm wondering if there's going to be a focus on perfume and purifying it more, but also bring more awareness to, someone who likes, I personally love essential oils. I got quite a collection, but it's also, how do we, a lot of people like that. How do we sustain that? How are we getting the stuff? Is there, are we drying out the supply of the plant itself? And, I think you're onto something there. It's like, everybody's going to want these scents, but these bigger questions that are going to come up around, how we obtain them. And also the labels that they put on claiming things are pure when they're not. And so great point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Sherene.
Oil. I love I have my lavender before I go to sleep, and
well, we'll let you go off to dreamland, which, Taurus to me is definitely sleep. I had a Taurus moon partner for years, and that man could sleep. I was like, dude, wake up, like get up.
Yeah, we are really slow and steady. We're very slow and steady. Sorry, Sherene, what were you saying?
No, I was just saying I love sleeping, and I don't even have a Taurus moon, but I have Pisces moon. That's probably second to none with sleep.
Yes.
I live for my sleep time. I live to sleep.
That's funny.
Thank you, Sherene.
Yes, thank you for joining us, Sherene. We appreciate your time and your willingness to stay up late with us here today.
I wish I could stay longer. It's really fun to talk with you ladies.
Do you have a website or any information you can share just before you go for people who can find you?
Thank you. Sure. My website is sherenevismaya.com. It sounds like there's an H in my name. There's not. Sherene has an H, but Vismaya, sherenevismaya.com. I guess you'll put it in the notes, right?
I will put it in the notes so you can get to Sherene. All right. So, well, thank you for joining us. We hope you sleep well. And we'll carry on our Taurus Scorpio conversation.
And I'll be here through the astral.
That's right. That's right. Sherene speaking to us. I feel like
obviously you guys will travel over to all your homes and all the different continents. We like listening.
Perfect. So we bid you adieu, Sherene, and we'll let you know how it goes further.
Bye.
Thank you, Sherene.
Bye, Georgia.
All right, ladies. Well, we are on to what are we on to? We've talked about that's the thing when you have an agenda. That's it's always subject to change. And I feel like that is like the story of just the nodes in the past few years in Gemini and Sagittarius.
Yeah, we have a shifting agenda. I think the collective shift, when you pay attention to the nodes, it's the collective story shifts. So, and what's important to us and how our values shift. And I think we've kind of been feeling, if we've been paying attention, we've been feeling this emphasis of Taurus because it was such a heavy emphasis, like Sherene said, on, online learning and like, it's just the intangible. And then the shift to the tangible, like how are we going to make that shift? And one thing I wanted to bring up that sort of came to mind that to me sort of embodies this nodal shift is, do you know that Irish writer, they say she's like the millennial writer, Sally Rooney?
Hmm.
She's, oh, you don't know her? Okay. Well, apparently she's like a blockbuster type of writer, and she's only in her, maybe, is she in her early 30s, maybe even? I don't know if she's that old. But she has been writing, she wrote Normal People and Conversations with Friends, and they were like huge blockbusters, mostly in the UK and Europe. And they became TV shows and movies or whatever, but they were all about young people like kind of just stumbling their way into their sexuality, and like, you know, just a lot of it, some of it was honestly, it's kind of like soft porn to me. I think that was why people were like eating it up. They're like,
Oh, people
wow,
love some soft porn, you know,
it's
it's
literature and detailed sex, you know, because to me I was a little bit like, you know, my like private Scorpio, I mean, I was like, oh, keep that in the bedroom. But it was interesting how it was told, because it's refreshing and honest and raw. That's what people loved about it. And, you know, because we all make mistakes. I mean, it's, you know, we're all just kind of figuring it out when we're actually our whole lives, but especially when we're younger, you know, we don't know what we like or what we want or who's, you know, we're still trying to figure out social cues and things. But then her latest book was such anticipated, right? It was like the most anticipated book of 2021. And it came out, and of course it was an instant bestseller. However, a lot of her like tried and true fans who kind of made her famous, like the millennial generation, a lot of people, there was a huge backlash because they said they were really disappointed because, and this isn't too much of a spoiler, but I'm going to say it anyway because this is part of the story, was that it ended up being more about traditional values, getting back to really appreciating relationships, marriage, home, you know, having children, like, you know, those things, like, and even maybe getting back to religion, which, you know, in Ireland, I think they have like, they certainly have sort of a long history there with the Catholic Church and things. And a lot of the you know, younger people were like, no, what happened to the, you know, rejection of all of these things, rejection of all of what we're supposed to do? But you know, it seemed to be like a maturing of an individual, and finding her, not just that that's what maturity is, but what gave her a sense of her values, you know? So it's, of course, we think of Venus and Taurus about what are your values, really coming back to your true values, something that gives you a sense of, you know, a real groundedness, and that you are living your true values, not the values of other people, not what's just feels good in the moment, but what is a continuation of your life, your legacy, and, you know, what's true for you, you know, beyond what your parents, your family, society tells you are your values. What are your true values? And that's what they always say, is most people that have this sense of not fitting in with life or not fitting in with society, is because they haven't truly gotten clear on their own values and started living their values. And so to me, that was sort of a harbinger of, you know, this whole nodal shift. Is, you know, it's often said that with Scorpio, it can be like, just especially someone with South Node in Scorpio, you know, has grown up, as Stephen Forrest has said, forged in the fire. Like maybe there's been a lot of drama, emotional drama and trauma, maybe even abuse, you know, some of those dark things that we think of as Scorpionic archetype. And a movement toward, you know, what Taurus wants is peace, stability,
yeah.
survival, you know. And again, it's easy to think of, we're moving from the South Node to the North Node, and as Georgia said, it can be a lot more complex than that, because there's so much more nuance to it. Because, you know, both archetypes, whether it's South Node and North Node, they have their light and their shadow. But can we look at, say, potentially the shadow of South Node and Taurus and use it as, in a way, fertilizer to grow our way into the higher side of Taurus, or whatever it is, our values that give us that sense of that we are on our path? And I think that's one of the things I know I've noticed for myself, is I'm coming back to, like, I just want a home and connection to nature and stability and
I feel
consistency.
that.
But as you all have said before, clinging to, something that's surety, like we never know. The Saturn Uranus square is still essentially in effect all year, will be highlighted by the nodal axis, which means that, even though there's certain things that show us that we want to cling to the past and to a sense of stability and like the Saturnian, stability and structure and authority that maybe part of us is used to. That Uranian element of the change is here, like it or not. We have to change with the times, and those can still be creating that schism in our lives.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because what I heard when you were talking, and it really could go either way, right? Because we can always find, anybody that's Gemini energy, like me and Christina, like we can always be the devil's advocate or find the other side of it. And so part of me was thinking when you were talking about the necessity of preserving tradition and why we have traditions to begin with. And I only say that because we have been in a space, especially with Gemini and Sagittarius energy, and everybody pushing to change the collective norm and the narratives and the dialogues and how we classify things, and putting everybody on, on blast for just all these ways of being that are no longer applicable or don't. And all that stuff is very valid. Don't get me wrong, but but in our fast-paced changing world where we're trying to automate and be like more robotic and connect all the tech, I'm like, what about these like earthly traditions and these things that help us feel stable as people, and like things like having a home or having land or connecting with nature or making a commitment to someone that is longer, that like everything doesn't have to be open, and maybe open doesn't work for everyone, but it's all valid for those people, that everything's valid, right? But I think trying to push one narrative and saying that is the future for all, I feel like tradition is going to push back a little bit. And yes, we have to readjust to this new normal that we are building. But that's the beauty of tradition, is there is value in it. And because it has value, it makes sense to take it into the future with us, and then maybe start to morph that. I see Georgia's getting excited. She's like, yes. Georgia, tell us what you think about that.
No, I love that so much, Melissa. And it really, really speaks to what Christina was saying. And I was feeling and thinking the same thing while you were sharing, Christina, because I think of how, well, absolutely, this was actually very much a lot of the lessons of this Saturn-Uranus square, was that we were thinking, okay, look, yeah, Uranus, the future, we need to leave the Saturnian old patriarchal shiz behind and let's go. Uranus future now, progression. Let's do it. But then, it was really important to speak to the fact that actually not all tradition, not all of the past is bad, like and labeling it as such. And that was in very many a way, just as you spoke to, Melissa, some of the traps of the South Node in Sagittarius. There can be such a violence with this kind of, there was this labeling and categorizing as what was right, what was wrong, what was progression and what was regression, such as though that young audience of Sally Mooney, did you say? I don't, Christina?
Sally Rooney. Yeah,
Rooney, excuse me. That a younger audience, millennials, saying, oh, I thought you were progression, you were a progressive writer that was providing an incredible roadmap to the future in more progressive ways, very Uranian, right? Oh, but actually you're very Saturnian, and like, no, why does that have to be the case? Like you said, Melissa, what was that North Node in Gemini really teaching us? It was that we need to kind of come out of some of the really like the violent, for me, I experienced it as a lot of violence with, people just kind of were paralyzed into self-censorship because they were like, oh my gosh, there's this increasing sense of right and wrong, rather than the fact that every story, every human experience is valid, has validity. And maybe we're really disconnected from that. But then once we do come into that, sense of truth, that sense of Uranian, that's what is it that makes me unique? What are my unique set of values? It should be okay and safe for us to share that with each other. Unity in diversity, that's Uranus, we are all so different. And yes, some of us truly, we are monogamous. We are monogamous. We just want like the home and the family. And I say just, that's a huge journey to take, but we don't have to label it as old and new. And this is why I love the phrase that Charles Eisenstein points to. He uses this all the time, that we're really looking at a new and ancient future. New and ancient. There are so many dangers of us looking at, what we categorize as really the new and the revolutionary, and looking at the technological age, where really in so many ways we're becoming more and more disembedded from our ancestral roots, from those that have come before us. Like, our ancestors did not survive for hundreds of thousands of years. They survived for a reason. What and how? This is when we look to the indigenous peoples, we look to the, what was it like? That's, what has rooted and grounded and sustained us through these generations. And then within only a few generations, we've lost almost all of it. And we are catapulting ourselves off of a cliff. Okay, yes, new is interesting. Yes, new, absolutely. The scientific progress, discoveries and progression, these are all absolutely a part of the future story of humanity. These are absolutely a part of our Uranian future, but we cannot leave the past behind, especially the ancient past. And I think that's why as well I love the Taurus energy is such simplification. Something I loved when I really learning from the indigenous peoples I got to connect with and learn from and work with, my ancestors and relatives in Shlatlium, there is such a simplification of their lives, of their, what they focus on, what is important to them, just even the way they speak, we complexify things so much often, so much. And we have this imperative need to sound intelligent, and we just complexify things to a fault, really. I think I'm excited that Taurus, I think, is really going to allow us and encourage us to come back to what is actually important, what is actually essential. I actually wrote down this quote, and I don't know who the author is, but the fact that I do think the South Node in Scorpio is going to propel us into increasing uncertainty, right? Increasing volatility, like the ground feeling like it's slipping beneath our feet, and we're kind of going to be with a potential climate, natural disasters and all kinds of systemic changes. And I think I love this quote that says, when everything is uncertain, Scorpio, everything that is important becomes clear. And that's what's really exciting about Taurus, is that that light's gonna shine on her. Like, yes, okay, that's what we've been missing. And the indigenous peoples, I think, are really gonna rise and shine in that conversation. I really do think so.
I was just shared this with Christina the other day. By the way, I got chills when you read that quote, because it obviously spoke to me in a cute way. But I was just telling Christina the other day, I sent you a news article about the first Native American to be appointed to the head of the Smithsonian Museum. And having, so seeing
just as the nodes shifted, right? Or
right after the nodes shifted. Yeah. And then
amazing.
Yeah. And there was also a court appointment for a woman. Oh God, I'm messing it up. I'm not going to butcher it, but we're seeing these necessary variations, and feminine, we think about Venus energy, feminine energy coming into power. So that definitely speaks.
Totally. And I think that, oh, absolutely. I think, there's two things that come up, if you don't mind me sharing. The first, just in reference to what you were sharing about these shifts happening with people come into politics and into these positions of power and influence. I do find it interesting that I even just noticed this in the news, actually, over the last year, that with the climate summits and COP, for example. And I just note it's really interesting that politicians that are, very famous for just, the gift of the gab, really, just a lot of empty words. But what was phenomenal is how their language was changing. I saw Boris Johnson, our prime minister, using indigenous language, essentially. And I don't usually watch the news. I try not to, because, I kind of sort of try to somewhat cleanse myself from it for significant periods of time. But when I turned on, and I just thought, wow, this is such a shift. Yet North Node in Gemini, we can speak a lot of stuff, and that absolutely does shift things. It does. The language we use is incredibly powerful. But now that North Node's in Taurus, it's like, okay, what are you actually going to do about it? Like, how is this, you know, a lot of people, I remember when I was in Canada, and I remember at any sort of indigenous well, actually any gathering, and I remember at the very beginning what they would do is they acknowledge the land that they were standing on, and who, you know, the original inhabitants of that land, or the indigenous roots of that land, and the ancestral whose ancestral homeland is it. But then, and I remember this one time I turned to this indigenous boy sitting next to me, a friend of mine. This was very early on in my time in Canada, and I said, wow, that's so amazing, that's so great that they did that. I'm really shocked that they did that. And he schooled me in 1 second. He turned to me and he said, yeah, that is nothing. They do that every single time. And it really is, it can be, you know, it's important, it absolutely is. But because as a young indigenous boy that has seen that constantly growing up with little to no actual substance that goes along with it, it's like, okay, now that North Node in Taurus, we're gonna absolutely have to make it real. And this is the thing, because it's not just affecting indigenous peoples anymore. They're on the front lines of this climate crisis most often, but it's going to affect all of us. It's going to come to our front doors. I have this sort of inner premonition or inner prediction in my mind, and I think the first time that a major city of the world is going to go through immense flooding and destruction, I feel like only then is our collective consciousness going to go, okay, snap, like we're in this now, you know. I feel like that could happen. I feel like that's definitely going to happen with Uranus in Taurus at some point, but it could happen in the next year and a half, you know, because the sea levels are rising. We are going to face immense flooding at some point, and it's going to affect our everyday systemic reality. It has to. So,
Yeah.
And what are we going to do about it?
It's very biblical in nature, you know, like it's.
I wanted to say a little something on that too, is that I love that, going from, it was important for us to have this collective awareness around, you know, what is the land that we're on, that we, you know, the native people that are the original stewards of the land. And then the next step is, you know, who are the descendants of those peoples, and can we reach out to them, and how can we make certain things right? I saw something that really, for me, it just made things so aware, is that when it spoke about, you know, BIPOC or different minority groups, or groups that are treated like minorities, that might not be minorities in number, but that are marginalized, you know, different marginalized groups. Yes, it's great that we are acknowledging them and things like that, but what really can be healing for them and their trauma of continually facing racism and marginalization is that if they're able to earn a good living and just have like a roof, you know, a consistent roof over their heads, and food, and be nourished. And you know, a lot of these inner city places, they don't even have grocery stores. That's something that just blew my mind. They don't even have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, you know, and think what that does to a person when they're only eating, you know, processed foods and sugars and things like that, just to keep them going, just to like fill their belly a little bit. And I also noticed that in my own life. So much of my, you know, my husband and I have been in the arts for so long, and then I went to astrology, not exactly so stable. But then when we got to a point where, you know, now my husband has like a job at a university, and we have this more sort of stable life, it's just something in me can relax. I actually feel, I feel more safe. I feel like I can, that in a way is healing. And when you think that there's other people that just haven't had access to these opportunities because of, you know, the mindset that keeps people from, you know, these gatekeepers for whatever reason, and it could be one's own mindset that I'm not worthy of, you know, having a certain position in society, or whatever, I don't have the degree, then and they're always kind of just putting together, just, you know, just collect, what's the word, just like creating a life just from a little job here, or a little, you know, just making some money here and some money there and trying to piece it all together and feed children and live. That's no way to really live. You're constantly in a state of anxiety. And I think what the pandemic has shown us is just increased our collective anxiety so much that we realize all those other little things, like why are we putting ourselves through that, ourselves and other people through these things, when why can't we all just protect one another? And when it comes to things like the climate crisis, it's like, okay, yeah, I can bring my like bag into the grocery store, I can recycle, my recyclables, but is that enough? Like, what else can we all be doing collectively? I think it's a lot of us are kind of almost waiting for like, please just tell me, how can I help? And it might have to come from some real insight of how not only can we just prevent doing harm, but how can we actually maybe make up for, healing the earth? And I'm hoping that at some point with the Uranus and Taurus that we may have some advancements in that area.
You know what spoke to me, Christina? Well, a lot of that spoke to me, Christina, but one of the things you brought up was the really real issue of what is known as a food desert in cities. And I know there's been movements here in San Diego to get the fresher options and get those grocery stores that have those things to the areas that need them. But the bigger picture that comes up to me when I'm asking that question is thinking about Uranus and Taurus, and how especially Uranus only meets the North Node every in its same sign every 167 years. And really at the advent of cities and cities getting bigger in places like New York, and like that's what changed the whole farming industry, because people used to be on land that supplied the food, or at least would be near the people that supplied the food. And it brought a lot of issues into how do we bring fresh food into these burgeoning cities, and the disconnect between the land and the food itself, and how much time has gone on where people don't know where their food comes from. They don't know what they're eating. We have chemical replacements in it. It makes me think of one of the craziest things I watched was like a PBS special on like this whole milk crisis, like at the turn of the century, where people were selling these, it's like there wasn't refrigeration. Everybody thought they had to drink milk, but they were selling this like rotten milk on a daily basis, and people were just getting sick. And because they're trying to bring it to the cities, you need the milk, but it's coming from these faraway places. And so it brings up all these questions of like, how do we get the food to the concentration of the people? What does it say about the transportation that it takes to get there? What does it say about the level of population and trying to feed as many people on land that's not being replenished? Like, these are all big questions, especially here in the States, because we farm differently than anywhere else in the world. Like, we have very questionable farming practices, which I think will come into play. But just you bringing up the food desert, I was like, oh, there's such a bigger story behind all that. And I'm wondering if the nodes are going to start to extract that, especially with Uranus there.
Yeah, and they say, like in France, they say like, what is organic farming? We've always had organic farming. That's just how it is. And then, I mean, when you go in the grocery store and there's an aisle for health food, you're like, wait a second, shouldn't it all be health food? Why is there only one aisle?
Preach.
One part of an aisle for health food. And I even asked my mother, because at one point I was just like, I wonder what I'm allergic to naturally and things like that. My mother's from the Philippines, and she said they never had dairy. Like, they didn't have refrigeration much, and they weren't into milking cow. Like, it just wasn't part of their lifestyle. So I kind of just thought, do I even really need it? I mean, it's nice for a little treat now and then, but how much do we really need these things that are kind of, like, the dairy farmers together, that they have a lot of power, and they can buy, advertising and make it. I mean, even I remember at the time, not that I'm totally against dairy, but having it part of like a healthy meal, that actually is not real for everyone. And the fact that it's part of the USDA kind of, or, the whatever,
the food
FDA,
pyramid.
Yeah, food pyramid. It doesn't need to be in the food pyramid. It can just be like a nice little side thing. But that's my opinion. But you've never seen more. I had never seen more intense battles than when I was studying holistic nutrition. Wow, when you were talking before about with even essential oils. Oh my gosh, there was a huge battle with those essential oils, the different companies, and people are. It comes from a good place that they really want us to be aware of where things are coming
Yeah.
from and get the truth from it. But yes, some things when they expand into these battles, that might be something we kind of want to watch out for. If our intention is really to help one another, you know, we do what we can to help ourselves and one another. And I think we want to watch out for some of these unnecessary battles when that urge might be there more with so much of the Mars energy.
Well, and you know what comes to my mind too, which I'm seeing a lot of talk around just recently, and I could be coming late to the game, but diet culture and people really getting on diet culture and the evil that is connected with, you know, just maintaining a certain frame or having to have this exercise and this movement towards intuitive eating, which I've been an intuitive eater all my life. Like that's how I didn't know. I guess I know other people eat in different ways, but that's how I go around things. And so I'm just wondering if there's going to be more and more of like, because right, it's the diet, what we're ingesting, how we're taking care of the vessel, how we feel within the food that we eat and how we embody that, and the shame that is put on people for how their bodies look. I mean, I feel like Scorpio has a lot of shame around it in many ways, and it could be a very Saturnian thing too. So I'm wondering if there's just going to be more of that kind of diet culture, anti-diet culture narrative, and getting back to more of an intuitive sense of feeding ourselves and what we need.
Yeah, like the feeding ourselves and nourishing ourselves. I mean, I was surprised how when we had a first lockdown, there were so many people saying like, no matter what you do, make sure you get your workout in, even if you have to just do push-ups in your house. Like, it's like, okay, and now I understand it's good for cardiovascular, but like, it's like, is it really that? I mean, I gained over 20 pounds in these past couple of years. And you know what? I mean, yes, I want to watch like my health, but I almost felt like I had to do whatever it took for me to feel safe and good in my body. And maybe I also am looking back at some really unhealthy ways I've had of like, oh, I can't eat this or I can't eat that because what if I gain like a few pounds? Like, you know, I'm kind of like over that. I'm not trying to like I'm not going to be in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition anytime soon. So I think I can, I can gain a few pounds. And yeah, it's the shame of the like who do I need to look good for? You know, really, I need to look good for myself. I need to take care of my own health, and that's my priority. And also, you know, our mental health and our emotional health and wellness, that should be, and mental, emotional, and physical, they can all be tied. But when you're throwing two of those away just to look good and claim it's physical health, then that just doesn't hold water anymore.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, that being said, we've touched on a lot of things with the nodes here, but one things we haven't really got into yet is just kind of, I'm going to list some of the previous points of history that we had the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio. And I know we were kind of looking at some charts of maybe a few public figures that might play in with this and just kind of giving some thoughts around that. But the last passage of this transit with North Node in Taurus was in 2003 and 2004, actually, which was a crucial period for actually some tech coming up, which we could talk about here, which changed us into a new normal. That's the thing I'm noticing about like Taurus North Node is like things are introduced that are going to be very like implemented, but we might not know it at the time. But as I think Georgia was pointing out earlier about the slow pace of Taurus and like how it unfolds. And so what comes in this next, 17 months might not have like the acute energy that, air and fire has. And it has more of a, slow and steady. And then like 10 years now, you're like, oh my God, what happened then was now like, oh, I really realize the effect of it. But 2003, 2004, 1984 through 1986, 1966, 1967, 1947, 1949, and 1928 through 1930, which we all know here in the US is the big stock market crash and Black Friday. No, that's the day we shop. What was the stock market crash called? Oh, why is it escaping me?
Are you talking about 1928 to 1930? Was it 19?
Yes.
Yeah, 1929, the Great Depression. Was that where there was a day and
there was a day, and I don't think it was called Black Friday. I think I'm just brainwashed by shopping.
It was the Wall Street crash, but I don't know which day it was.
It had like a catchphrase. Oh my God. There's going to be listeners right now yelling it. It's this.
Yes.
Yeah. So think back at those times, if you were alive during those times, if you were born during these times, right? Because I have a partner that was born with North Node in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio. So a lot of you late 1984 babies through early 1986 might have these placements, and you're coming to that very crucial time of the nodal return there. But one of the things that comes to mind with the 2003, 2004, and Christina and I have been talking a lot about Mark Zuckerberg's chart, right? And he created Facebook around that time, right? And he's a very Taurus Scorpio character, and he's just coming out. He had his nodal return, I think, with he has a North Node at the beginning of Gemini, and he's talking about the metaverse. And this new reality that we're going into, this new digital reality. And so I figure we talked about maybe sharing his chart a little bit and seeing so let me bring that up real quick.
It does feel like Facebook, it's just gotten so stale, for the longest time. At first it was this fun, kind of exciting new thing. Then it just became almost like a public utility, like everybody had it. And now, through, of course, there's been the controversies and things, and some people just cling on to, because it's what we know, it's how we kind of stay connected to certain people. But I don't know, it just is feeling really stale. So I'm guessing that there is a new, anytime we have this whole nodal cycle with the nodal return, that ushers in a new story in a person's destiny. And I actually did a review of some eclipses to his chart and things like that for the UK's Astrological Association for their latest conference. I think that was in, I want to say October, November. So if I can remember, what I remembered was when he first started, it was before he actually launched Facebook. He launched another thing called, it was something similar, but he basically stole all of the photos for the student photos when he was in Harvard, and he put on, it was supposed to be a joke, right? It was like some joke, like online. It was kind of like pre-Facebook. And it was kind of like this online social media thing, but I don't think people gave their permission. So it got shut down by the school. And then he just retooled it and things like that. And so it took a few months and things like that. And then he launched the Facebook. But then within a few months, it really grew. And then by the time it grew to all the sort of Ivy League schools. And at that point where it grew to all the Ivy League schools, there was another eclipse that was showing up to that other Facebook when Facebook was actually sort of like really launched in the world. But it was interesting that first attempt was kind of a failed attempt, but it kind of had that scorpionic kind of like, like stealing stuff, or not that Scorpio steals, but it was kind of like underhanded in its initial intention. But then I think you probably saw the potential of it and decided to grow it. What I've noticed from his chart was the eclipses or transits that actually hit his Venus were much more part of the storyline of his quote unquote legacy than eclipses to his sun or his nodes or anything like that, which is interesting because Venus rules his sun. Mm-hmm. And so that to me has showed and he was born on a lunar eclipse. So that, so eclipses really tended to affect him. And it's interesting how someone born on a lunar eclipse, the lunar eclipses often really kind of, are vibrant or vivid in their life.
Yeah. And well, it makes sense that his Venus would be so activated in the chart, being the ruler of his sun there. And he's got Venus at 15 degrees of Taurus, and later in this summer, when the Uranus and the North Node are dancing together around, those middle degrees of Taurus, I think his chart's going to be very activated. And especially once Saturn gets to that point, I think in April, Saturn will get, in March, actually, Saturn will be square his Venus there. So I think we're going to, he wants to implement things, right? He has these, you sign on to Instagram or Facebook and it's like powered by Meta. And I'm like, what is this Meta? Like, where is he trying to take this? By not, and like trying to go into this next world, right? And not really dealing with all the allegations and controversy around what's already been created and how it's changed, the face of humanity. And not only that, but also how people are using it in ways to like connect very seedy issues in certain parts of the world, like, or it's their only form of connection within governments that are oppressive. Like there's so many things that are not being addressed with Facebook, and it's trying to move into this new phase. And it's like, is it going to get there? Is it going to be able to reestablish? I think about that with Taurus energy, like we establish with Taurus, and as we have eclipses that go through, like, well, what are we reestablishing? How sturdy is it? Is it built to last? Will it fall apart when we get to the eclipses and Scorpio there for him? I don't know.
And also the other thing with his Venus also has been tied to his net worth too, because I think there was an eclipse on his Venus that that showed a real drop in his net worth. I think the last eclipses that were around that time. And so he's got Venus opposite Saturn. So then that Saturn will essentially be creating a T-square, right? And so he's one of the richest men in the world right now, right? Or one of the youngest billionaires or something like that. And I don't know. It could be with Saturn, it's always hard to tell. Sometimes like it can bring rewards. Usually there's a struggle at first, or a delay, or a blockage or something. And maybe it is this shifting in some ways, his net worth is tied to a lot going on.
It is
his metaverse. So
yeah,
I would be looking at, maybe he's, the stock prices aren't what they aren't as robust. Maybe he's having to work harder to build sort of the infrastructure for this new iteration. So I'd be looking at those things.
Yeah. Well, I guess it helps that he has Venus in domicile. That's for sure. Georgia, you have any thoughts on old Zuckerberg here?
Yeah, no, I was especially after you mentioned just how long Mark Zuckerberg has actually been sort of getting away, skimming through and over a lot of the huge controversies around the nature of Facebook, and how, the way that Facebook runs and operates has influenced the entire terrain of social networking. And like the social dilemma, that documentary on Netflix really brought a lot of those issues to light and to the conversation. And younger generations who, of course, like, social media is modeled around, we are like the prime, the prime markets for it. I even think of the Pluto and Sagittarius generation. I have the younger sister of my boyfriend, she wrote about that for her piece at college, and we did this, it had such fascinating conversations. They're awake and aware of these conversations. Absolutely every part of their lives, unfortunately, is now embedded into social networking in so many ways. However, they're not, they're aware of these really darker dynamics. So it kind of does bring you into the Scorpio, what lies beneath the surface, what, for example, like you said, Christina, he is like one of, set records, one of the youngest zillionaires, super Taurus, over kind of distorted Taurus, really, in so many a way, which, because you really think about the intention of Facebook, the original intention. If you watch The Social Network, that film, you see that the intention of Facebook wasn't actually to better humanity and to, that wasn't like it wasn't Aquarian in nature in so many ways, or kind of, some of the most beautiful uniting aspects of it has had that effect, absolutely. But it seems that it more utilized, manipulated some of those desires of humanity to be connected in order to what? To make money, Taurus, right? To line their pockets. If you watch that film, it was all about monetizing, eventually getting to a point where, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg held back from it for a while, but then it was about monetizing, it was about adverts. So it was about money. And I think that, Taurus is about the long term and the sustainable. It is about what really lasts through the ages. I think about the Ponamu, the jade that I wear on me. I am not wearing this jade. This jade is wearing me. Like, this will last millennia more. That's what I was taught by the Maori man that carved it for me, Takacs. Like, we're here for a second. We have to think about what is not just like, the next quarterly profits, but the next 7 generations. And Facebook is not, I don't believe, as a company that has done that. So much of social media was created very quickly and has had incredible mammoth effects on humanity. And now it's like, okay, Taurus is like, slow down. What are we actually doing here to our earth, to each other, to the future of humanity? And I think that it's very interesting, because I think about the fact that there's this imperative need to really descend, to get still, to slow down. And this descent, I just want to make this, if you don't mind, just quickly quote here Richard Tarnas. This was really life-changing for me. And it's just because I'm thinking the way that Richard Tarnas speaks to the necessary descent that humanity needs to make, and how actually these eclipses are hitting Mark Zuckerberg's chart. For example, in the one in I see here the one that's going to be at 2 degrees of Scorpio, the solar eclipse conjunct Venus, that will be right on his Pluto, right? Like, this absolute this necessary descent to a soul level. So much of our values, of what we put out into the world, of what we create, is so surface level and so much more short-term and immediate. And this quick quote, if I could share this, is that it was this talk that changed my life, and it was called The Humanity's Rite of Passage, that Richard Tarnas gave in 2015. I actually watched it around the same time I read Deep Adaptation, so just kind of really, really plummeted me into the Scorpio-Olic realms. But it's an incredible talk. And he actually quotes this man called Ulrich Cousins, who said that now the consciousness of the 21st century will be global from 2 perspectives. One, from a horizontal perspective. The cultures and religions are meeting each other on the surface of the globe, entering into creative encounters that will produce a complexified collective consciousness. And in so many ways, I think about the recent Gemini-Sag transit of the nodes with that, but also Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook absolutely has created this kind of global network, right? But also, it is the consciousness is shifting into a vertical perspective. We must plunge our roots deep into the earth in order to provide a stable and secure base for future development. I mean, what is the metaverse really creating here? Aren't we just we could literally just further disembed ourselves from the realities of our earth. We could potentially just be hurtling ourselves further and further off of the cliff face, because we are just, do you see what I'm saying? We're becoming more and more disembodied, more and more disconnected. These are the massive dangers of the metaverse, and just growing Mark Zuckerberg's bank account for the sake of growing Mark Zuckerberg's bank account. No, it has to be about more than that. I know. So yeah, I'm interested in that Scorpionic reckoning.
What that's kind of making me think of is during the nodes in Gemini, Sagittarius, I think of like Sagittarius, the South Node is like everyone's opinion, it's like no matter how much you have the data and facts about, say, for instance, climate change, you can Google something that'll say climate change is not real, like there's going to be something out there with someone with some kind of opinion or argument. And okay, yes, we want to have a balance, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes there is truths, like you said, that we will only know when we are connected to the earth, when we're actually looking outside, when we're actually being aware of what's happening to the earth, rather than just a constant online, I'm right, you're wrong. Oh, here's a YouTube video to show that I'm right. Like it's ridiculous. And I'm noticing that, with the South Node coming to his Saturn, even for a temporary period, that can drain one of their authority in certain ways. So thank you for bringing that eclipse up, because and an eclipse on a person's Pluto, as we know, these outer planets, sometimes they're generational, but they can also be in some ways very personal to a person's life, to their trajectory.
Yeah. Well, we think about the collective there, and if the collective wants change and they're pushing things or want to bring up, the seedy underbelly of what's been happening and want to like purify the energy, like it can change his life completely because the collective is asking for it. And so that could definitely play a role there. And to speak to what Georgia was saying earlier about like getting back to the earth and what are we rooting and where's all this taking us? And this might be the dynamic that we're trying to really sort out as we get into this air age, right? Because we just had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. We're entering in this, couple 100-year period where we have these cultural shifts in air energy. And so this is fresh territory for us. And we've been dancing in between what technology is going to bring in this virtual reality and getting farther and farther away from each other and sharing ideas like we are in like this digital space. But where does that leave us with our connection to Earth? And so, this time period with these eclipses could bring up some very important questions that are really just a precursor to a much larger story and situation of like, what's this next 200 years going to look like? And, when we're at the outset of it, we're obviously creating framework around what that looks like. So these times are super important. And, and one of the other things that happened in 2003 and 2004 with Google, Google was coming up as a company at that time too, and everyone was asking, when is Google going to go public? How do we get shares of this company that people saw was going to be massive? And they didn't want to do the stock market the original, like the usual way. They went about it a totally different avenue to have people invest in their company, and they ended up doing it actually when the nodes moved to Libra and Aries, but all the conversation around it was during the Taurus Scorpio period. And look at Google today. Google is just like massive, just as big as Facebook, bigger. We have like, they own so much. And that was a starting point for them to really build their wealth in the community space and stocks too. So I'm very curious to see really what new foundational structures, aside from Facebook and Google, what's being birthed now, or what is getting off the ground now, because they could be the next Facebook or Google, with what's going, I don't know. So that was fascinating to me here too, but big questions, right?
I like what you say about this eclipse touching Zuckerberg's Pluto, and then it could be, the seedy underbelly kind of coming to light, because, the damage of Facebook not monitoring some more damaging messages, think about how many, and also the young kids being bullied to the point of suicide, things like that, and Facebook not doing enough to prevent a lot of this damaging thing, because maybe, oh, there weren't laws telling them they had to, so they didn't have to, and that kind of thing. It's no longer okay. It's like, you have with great power, you have great responsibility.
True.
And so maybe we'll see how much Zuckerberg or whoever has lived up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being said, well, we are getting to our almost 2-hour mark here. And I kind of want to do like a little conclusion of kind of the things we've talked about, or what we all extracted most out of this today, or just like, I love speaking keywords. Maybe it's the simplicity of Taurus. Let's finite this. But I mean, Georgia, what are the few takeaways of what we've talked about, what you think this whole transit will be, some of those keywords, what to lean into?
Yeah, I love, trust a group of Scorpionic souls to really find the gem in the muck of it all. I feel like a lot of, I'm sure, the South Node in Scorpio, it feels to me, even as, super Scorpionic, but it's a daunting transit. It's intimidating for sure. Scorpio is already, anything going through Scorpio, it's about death, it's about loss, it's about things ending. And then you have the South Node there, which is a point of release, of ending to some degree, of draining. And it is a daunting and intimidating transit. And yet, as Scorpio souls, we're like, okay, yeah, but we've been through the darkness, we've been through the tunnels, and we know what the powerful the gems and the beauty, the Taurian Garden of Eden that comes out of the muck. I think of, talk about simplicity, is Thich Nhat Hanh's quote, "No mud, no lotus." That has been on my mind the last couple of days, right? Mud is Scorpio, lotus is Taurus. And I think that, with this, we are, everything that we can possibly speak about this transit, we are very much aware that a lot is going to be coming up from beneath the surface, things that are Scorpionically, they are taboo, they are the most uncomfortable things we could face, they are scary, they will create, there will be fear, there will be a revisiting of trauma on some levels, it's going to be difficult content. But I think what is most important is that what's most important is to know that the only way out is through. We cannot skip over that process. In evolutionary astrology, there's this talk of the evolutionary imperative. Evolution has to happen. The only constant is evolution, and we create far more suffering by resisting that. We need to somehow lean into it and go through it. But it is to know, all planets, they go through go through Scorpio, but they don't just die there and end there. They come out on the other side. This is why I always say Sagittarius for me feels like the most optimistic sign of the zodiac. It's like, oh my God, I thought it was all over. No, it's not. Like, life goes on. It goes on. And that's just going to keep our eye on the prize. Like, my Taurus moon is just like, right, Uranus and Taurus, like, we are heading for the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I believe that in my heart, and I do believe it's going to get rough before it gets better. But that's how you create a gem, is you put it in a tumbler and you chuck it around, and that beautiful, refined, shiny gem comes out of it. And it's going to be tough, but I think I'm excited for how our vision of the new earth and that Garden of Eden that we see, how that's going to become more and more clear, and that we can really excitingly put our focus on that, what that future is going to look like for us, where we're more closely connected to the earth and to each other.
Yeah. I love that. I support that reality for sure. Oh my goodness. Christina, what are your takeaways that are reverse nodal baby here with this? I feel like you have an innate wisdom around this zone.
Well, I couldn't have said it better than what Georgia just shared with us, because I was thinking the whole thing about, again, the only way through is to really go through, like, what did Churchill say? If you're going through hell, keep going, right? You certainly don't want to stop there and have like a picnic. You need to keep going, because that is part of the path. And we may be at times feel plunged into, the dark night of the soul, as if, we think, oh, well, we've already been through that. But I feel like the past couple of years has been this just trying to get through it, almost not even fully contemplating or processing what we're going through, because we just have to keep going through it. I think some of the gifts of, say, Jupiter in Pisces, and then we'll have all this whole Pisces stellium coming up this spring, is maybe we can then process, the grief, the sorrow, and the escapism, and the feeling of this moment that we're really in and what we've actually been through. My hope is that with the South Node in Scorpio, maybe we will find a new way of engaging with death. And also because there have been so many souls that have passed that haven't had the benefit of the actual rituals, of funerals and family gatherings around that. Maybe there's some way that can be honored and sort of even made up for in a way. Maybe we can come to terms with the fact that we've all been having to face our own mortality. So in some ways it's been beautiful. People have been more creative. They've been more compassionate. They've been more aware and awake than ever before. But in other ways, it can also bring out, when we're really fighting for survival, it can bring out the worst of our shadow. So I love that what everyone here has touched on is the transformative power of Scorpio. We have to be drawn into the Scorpio realm in order to, sort of sift through all of the muck, and find our way back to a sense of connection to the earth and connection with our true values that we really want to leave as our legacy. And I love how with Georgia, she's like talking about connection to the earth, and it's almost like the plants starts like coming alive. Like, I don't know, those of you that aren't watching the video,
I'm shaking the table, so it's like I've got restless leg syndrome. Yeah, this plant next to me is like looks to be alive. Yeah.
There's actually, I did want to say one thing. There's I think a really beautiful series on HBO called Station 11 that, of course everyone's talking about the Don't Look Up, which is definitely worth watching, but the Station 11, it takes the whole sort of climate crisis, Armageddon, end of the world. It has another tone. It kind of almost goes through it. Like, what happens when the world does end? There's a pandemic and lots of people die, but humanity still survives. And what does it look like? And it follows basically like sort of a traveling like theater troupe that, it's like, it shows like what is really valuable to humanity. And in this particular narrative, it's art, it's music, theater, like, the great theater from Shakespeare, things like that last the test of time. And it's kind of quirky and strange in some ways, but it shows you that, yes, the nightmare, what if the nightmare were to happen? And even some people survive. How would they cobble together a sense of humanity? And to me, that was just very heartwarming to see that humanity could still survive if we know what it is that is the essence of our humanity. And personally, I love things like art. Astrology is a great art as well. And anything that has, human creativity behind it, I think that can sustain us.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of just the plight of the artist to begin with, and how much emotional content and at times trauma come up into really beautiful art that is created, and the two go hand in hand. When we think about the emotional watery self and the gifts of the soul into manifest reality, which is what the artist does, right? It gives us something tangible to see, to touch, to listen to, to hear. And I love everybody's points, and it just brings me back to the real simplicity of one of the things that Taurus is known for is peace. Right? Not a peace in the sense of Libra, where we're at peace with a disagreement, we're at peace with countries, etc. We're at peace with ourselves. And to be at peace with yourself, you can't overlook trauma. You can't overlook the undercurrents that are there that might be trying to be submerged or pushed down. And we've been through a lot of trauma. I mean, in our lifetimes, different levels of trauma for different people. Last couple of years, definitely so. Like, to speak to what you're just saying, Christina, about like not even being able to have the time or the space to honor the mass death that has gone on, and we all want to get to that place of peace. We all want to get to that place of stability. That could be a very personal thing. It doesn't even have to be outer. We're talking about receptive energies and of Taurus and Scorpio. So it's like that inside job that we talk about. And I think that this whole transit, if we have to, if the only way out is through that Scorpio component is trying to push us to peace within ourselves. And that is one of the most valuable things in my mind to existence, is being at peace with yourself and being at peace with where you're at and being at peace with where you're going. And you can't ignore everything that is. Not to say that people are trying. Like, I think a lot of people are working at it right now. We're like very aware in the sense that I just want to get to this place. What do I have to do? What do I have to feel? What do I have to talk about? What therapy do I have to do? What do I have to bring up? And I think that that's the benefit of this, and the benefit of Uranus being in Taurus during this whole thing is just giving us the awakenings we need in that evolutionary, step-by-step process to get us to that place. And of course, it's not going to be there forever. It's something that we constantly have to work at or assess within ourselves. But I think that peace component, the inner peace, is one of the big pieces of this nodal shift in my mind. So, all right, ladies. Thank you. Everybody, I loved what everybody had to share. I mean, everybody had such poignant points, and I don't know, I really this could be speaking to the Taurus, but I really felt a lot of the things that people were saying. Like, words would come out and there would be like tactile senses and goosebumps, and just like taking those words into a very, the body was feeling them. So
I
that's
feel
our
that
thing.
shift from like information overload,
Yeah.
like we gotta like learn what's going on in this new world. And then now is the processing of that and the experiencing. And so thank you for giving us this opportunity to share with one another. And I've learned so much, and you all are so dear to me. And I'm just so happy to have shared this time with you.
Yay. So, well, me too. I'm glad I could host. But before we go here, we got to share with the folks. Where can people find you? Christina, where can people find you? What do you got going on?
I'm at radiantastrology.com, and I don't know, it's TBD, to be determined what I got going on, but sign up for my free newsletter. That way you get, I'm actually kind of almost like how Sherene is, sort of drawing back a little bit, getting more into my essence. So I always share about the new moon and full moons, and eclipses are really where my heart is when it comes to astrology. I feel like this year my writings are going to be more intimate, personal, maybe more focused on sort of how the astrology can help us to understand ourselves, to understand what's important to us. And that's really kind of where I'm going, rather than just from the, just the general, oh, this is what this new moon means. I feel like I want to get to sort of like the conversation we had today, like, how can we process this? And maybe it might not be sort of the macro version of it, but something that comes from me, from my heart, that is meant to resonate with people on whatever, where their path is, that's wherever their path is leading them at the moment. So
yeah, tap into that Leo. We were talking about that earlier. That is the heart, right?
Oh my
But
God,
but you're Capricorn with Capricorn rising. Work that Saturn and Leo. You show us how to Leo. I love it, Christina. Georgia, where can people find you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, so I'm at georgiatakacs.com. That's TAKACS.com. And I have my newsletter too. And you can subscribe there on my website. And as I said, I provide one-to-one astrology consultations, and there's all the information on my website and how I offer those readings in the gift and how in the gift works, and the thought behind it, the intention behind it, if it's something that's new to you. And yeah, very similar to Christina, actually, to that Leo. This nodal axis is going to be square. Well, first of all, I've got the South Node on my sun at 28 degrees of Scorpio. So I feel that Leo energy coming up. I do have Chiron and Leo, and this nodal transit is going to be squaring that too. And I find, for so many years, I have been told I actually, increasingly so, I feel more comfortable in front of the camera, and I want to embrace that. And so I feel really pulled and drawn towards finally this year taking the leap to doing some YouTube video series. There's so much that I'd love to talk about and love to share. And that's, as soon as I get into spaces like this with you guys, and there's such beautiful, thought-provoking questions and conversation starters, and I just can't, I just want to talk and share and engage in conversation. You know me, hello, both you women know me well by now. Again, that's why I love being in this familiar territory with you guys, because I really open up. But absolutely, I that's going to be a little bit of a leap and a change for me. So YouTube's my next little stop, but that will all be accessible, and I'll keep up to date everyone via my newsletter. And also I'm on Instagram too. So at Georgia Takacs, I'm present there as well.
Wonderful. And I always share everybody's information. We'll share Sherene's as well if people didn't get in the mid broadcast when she had to leave us for deep sleep. So definitely check either the description where you're listening to this podcast, or you can visit me over at energeticprinciples.com, which I have a new website. I redid my whole website, and it's officially up. The last broadcast, I had issues in the whole server that does the DNS files just went down during the full moon in Capricorn with the Pluto component. And I was literally, at first I thought it was me. I was like, I redid the whole thing, and I was like, what? Did I do something wrong? Did it no, but it wasn't. It was a whole corporate, everybody's website is down, my website, my email, the whole thing. But it worked out, got it to the other side of the full moon. Everything was fine. So if you want to go check out that new space that I have created, once again, that's energeticprinciples.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, and there will be a blog post with our nodal panel here as well. And if I do have a newsletter. We all have fabulous newsletters, so be sure to sign up to get it to your inbox. But I'll have the February edition of the Heavenly Wind hitting inboxes here at the beginning of February. So check that out. And if you enjoyed our broadcast here today, spread the good word, share it with a friend, let people know what's happening in the skies and all this nodal energy that is shifting. If you'd be so kind to leave a review where you listen to this podcast, it helps it to be further seen in the good old algorithm. And yeah, it's I'm very excited about this whole shift. I'm excited that I got to share this time with you ladies and really flesh it out, which seems very Taurus in many regards. So I thank you both for joining me here today.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much for inviting me and having me as a part of this. And I love you women, you know that. And it was beautiful, beautiful conversation.
Absolutely. I'm very grateful. Very feeling the Venus. And I'm so grateful for all of you who have tuned in to listen to us talk all about the nodal axis in Taurus and Scorpio. We wish you the best of luck. Be sure to look at those areas in your chart, because that's going to be the juicy astrology for the next 17 months. So we wish you the best of luck through these transits. And as always, may the stars be with you.